Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We are here today with Mark Avena. Mark, hello there. Mark is the CEO of Smart Tech Research. Mark, we're here to talk about threads today and a few other updates. Mark, tell us a bit about yourself first.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here. And your afternoon, I think it's around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock over there.
Yeah, four.
Across the pond. So I run a small boutique research company. I cover all kinds of wonderful companies in the tech space, some consumer, some B2B, whether it's a device product side, an app, a service, infrastructure, because you really can't differentiate in technology the infrastructure that's needed to support a lot of these products. And obviously, I cover some of the hottest topics in tech right now, the whole threads emergence, the topic we're going to talk about. Obviously, is something that I love because there's always something different. That's the great thing about covering technology. It's not a banker's job.
No, and Mark, you have been covering so many updates recently, and I know that you're really you write for Tech News World, is it? Tech
Yes,
News World
yes.
and Forbes, and you've written for lots of other, and you've been on TV, ABC News. So you always have to have your finger on the pulse, don't you?
Yeah, it's the pressure is so much I can't handle it. There's too much stuff going on. No, that's really what makes it exciting. Is that there's really there is nothing more gratifying, frankly, from covering a topic on technology that really moves people, changes people's lives. I mean, one of the we've talked about off camera before, Sam. I began my career at Compaq and Dell. 15, 16 years, really in the middle of this PC revolution, where our tagline at Compaq, when we came out with the consumer Presario brand, for those people who can remember back in those days into the 90s, is that our tagline was, has it changed your life? And it was brilliant because technology at the end of the day only means something if it changes your life. Does it make your life more productive? Does it enhance your communications capability with loved ones, with other businesses? Does it entertain you? And of course, the stuff we had back in the 90s are toys in comparison to the technology we have today. So I love that aspect of technology, and there's never a dull moment.
Oh, that's for sure. So today we're going to talk about threads, and there's been a lot of people that have been jumping onto threads. Tell us a bit about threads and how do you feel about? I know for me, we haven't got it here in Ireland yet.
Yeah.
I have
One
no
of the problems, by the way, with threads, but well,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
we'll
I
get
have no
into.
intention of moving to threads, but you go ahead and tell us your thoughts.
Well, Threads essentially is a response from Mark Zuckerberg, who owns, of course, Facebook, formerly Meta, formerly Facebook, and Instagram, which are two incredibly popular social media platforms. And it really is a competitive response to what Twitter has done over the last 15 or 16 years. So, my view of the world is I'm a great believer in a competitive environment. God bless Mark Zuckerberg for coming out with a new platform. The foundational appeal of a Threads versus Twitter at a high level, if you kind of digest all the press information and the way folks like myself, analysts, feel about things, is that Zuckerberg really wants Threads to be kind of a Disneyland, and I use that comparison purposely because the reputation that Twitter has gotten, a bit unfairly, but it's gotten it, is that it's kind of a cesspool for misinformation, especially since Musk has acquired the company. We can get into some of those other issues later, but I really think he sees Twitter as kind of the public square. And there's going to be things that you like to hear, and there are going to be things that you don't like to hear, and there's no question there's a lot of crazy information, especially if it's about politics. Really hasn't affected business too much, although there are times from time to time when you see some really crazy stuff that people are saying about certain business topics. But politics, entertainment, those topics typically get a lot of emotional, I'm being very polite when I say that, emotional kind of exposure on Twitter. And on the other hand, what I think Zuckerberg has tried to do with Threads, he really wants to create this Disney-like, family-like social media exchange platform. The problem with that is, and I think we're now seeing that in the data, is that even though they kind of jumped off to a pretty good start, they've gotten, I think the latest numbers is 70, 80 million subscribers, although that's now has flattened out, is that people, now there are some feature deficiencies that we'll go into, which is, I think, a big problem. But I think one of the major issues is that people are finding it's not that entertaining. And I mean that not in an entertainment standpoint, but when you restrict the amount of content to non-controversial topics, you tend to become dull. And people in my area, like your area, who've been on Twitter forever, Twitter does have some of its downsides, from the things we've talked about, but it generally does not, especially since Musk acquired the platform, it doesn't suppress information unless there are certain categories of information that it will step in and I don't like to use the word suppress, but they'll certainly manage that much more tightly than they would if it was other types of information. But it's really an open forum, and I think that appeals to a lot of different people. Now, the other downside of Threads is that you've spent years building an audience on Twitter. I've spent years building an audience on Twitter. There are celebrities that have 5, 10, 15, 20 million followers on Twitter or more. That takes years to acquire. And it's very difficult getting all those folks, or even a significant portion of those folks, to hop off Twitter and go over to Threads. Now, if you're an Instagram follower, that's a little bit easier because of course, you would expect Zuckerberg to make it a bit easier for Instagram followers to become a follower on Threads. But at the end of the day, I think that's a big issue because, do you really want to spend all that energy now building an audience on that platform? The other problem we have with Threads is that, in marketing, we use a term called MVP, minimally viable product, when you're planning to come out with something. I'm going to get into a little bit of the weeds here. When a good marketing person comes up with a minimum viable product, an MVP, before the product ever gets into the hands of the engineers to actually develop, what you're saying is this product, whether it's a hardware product or a software product or an app, it has to have this many features for it to be appealing in the marketplace. Otherwise, don't launch it because nobody's going to use it. And Threads has the feel that it was kind of half-baked when it came out. Now, it does have kind of a look and feel that's similar to Twitter. It's not available in Europe. That's a problem. And how could you, in 2023, how could you launch a platform that doesn't comprehend, one of the biggest segments of the global market? So that's number one. Number two, there's a number of different features that are not available on Threads yet. Now, they'll probably fix this over time, but it doesn't have editing. You cannot edit a post. That's a problem. It's very difficult to impossible, frankly, now to see trends. Twitter's really good that, based on the algorithms of what you're interested in, you'll see, hey, here are the top tweets or posts that are relevant that, apps, I think is very helpful to a lot of different folks. So that's a number issue. The big issue for me, and there's a few other issues, but we could talk about this forever. It's not available on a desktop, unless you're using a mobile app and you've got, good flexibility with your thumbs.
Yeah.
And
or young.
Use a social media platform on Windows, on a Mac. It's very difficult for me to make that a routine part of my social media arsenal. So, I think it was half-baked, frankly. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that Threads should not have come to market. I think I believe in the advantages of a competitive market. Twitter doesn't have the entire global community as an audience. It has a very, very big audience. But I think at the end of the day, Threads doesn't really turn me on. And I think a lot of people, honestly, I think I can say this honestly, they signed up for curiosity reasons. They didn't sign up necessarily for, I'm going to use this day in, day in.
Yeah, I think FOMO, a lot of it was FOMO. But for me as well, my audience aren't on Instagram. So it's like, I don't know. But for me anyway, I haven't got access anyway. But Threads, so there was a big hullabaloo when it launched. But now we have Elon doing something very interesting. Have you noticed?
I have, and I must say, as someone who's got 20 plus years of marketing experience, I'm a bit befuddled. I was actually I was interviewed the other day in tech news world on what my thoughts were about this new X brand that they've announced. And I have to say that I'm a bit confused. And the reason why I start with this kind of premise. It took 15 years for Twitter to create this part of the vernacular, that you use when people say, I'm going to post something to Twitter, they use the word tweet. I'm going to tweet this. They become indispensable words in the English lexicon and other languages. I'm sure in Japanese they don't have a translation for Twitter. They probably use the word Twitter or tweet. Mm. From a marketing standpoint, Sam, that's gold. If you think back 30 or 40 years ago, when Xerox reigned supreme in copiers, okay, Xeroxing became part of the vernacular. Even if you didn't have a Xerox copier, you walked into the copier, I'm going to Xerox this. And from a marketing standpoint, that, it's very, very difficult to obtain that. So again, and it's still not clear to me what is up Elon Musk's sleeve in terms of, does he want to dispense with that? From a lexicon standpoint, I mean, what's the replacement word going to be for tweet? Is it going to be I'm going to X that?
Yeah,
I don't know. So we got to wait to see what's up his sleeve. I mean, let's face it, he's not a stupid guy. He's one of the most intelligent entrepreneurs on the market. He's obviously a polarizing figure. I get that. He has hinted that that Twitter or X as a new app is going to take on new capabilities. For example, one of the parts of Twitter that has taken a bit of a hit, actually not more of a bit of a hit, a significant hit, is their advertising business, because that's the way they drive revenue. I suspect they're going to do a lot more, frankly, to promote advertising, which is music to the ears of people who are big Twitter aficionados. So I'm going to be curious to see what's there. But there's lots of other capabilities he can build into that platform. So my guess is, I think what's gotten into his head is that I want to start from ground zero. I want to rebuild this from the top, and that includes a branding component. And by the way, I also would say that, let's face it, when you call something X with all its kind of nefarious meaning for many people, if not all people, for the most part, it's going to get eyeballs. So that might be part of a ploy just to get some attention.
Well, my opinion on that is, well, first of all, it's very masculine looking, the X, it's real strong, right? But he has this affinity with the X, doesn't he? With the SpaceX and Tesla and, the X model. But I really feel though, he can make this a super app, where people can take payments and stuff like that. But he already has people's credit cards from those who subscribe to Twitter Blue, for example, right. So he's already there's already a potential there, but an all-in-one app with maybe this kind of thing, like a studio live streaming. I just think if anyone's going to be able to do it, he will be able to do it. So, and I just think that Twitter still has that unique thing of live news as it happens. Most people will go to Twitter.
Right. No, I agree with that. And I think that, he's eyeballing other things. There's thoughts about him adding job postings to Twitter, which, by the way, LinkedIn kind of owns, and other job platforms own. So that might be an opportunity. A subscription platform for podcasts, where you can generate, you can have, for example, I have a podcast, it's on YouTube, but you've seen with guys like Tucker Carlson, who's a very popular, he's an influencer on the political side. He got let go by Fox very famously 3 or 4 months ago. He's very close. He's apparently very good friends with Elon Musk. He is now emerged on Twitter, and I think he's got 14 million followers, which is pretty amazing, And he's probably going to go to some type of subscription model for his content, And by the way, because if you're a verified Blue member of Twitter, all that information is already captured, and it makes that transition pretty easy.
Yeah, it makes sense to me now, really does. And I just feel Twitter Spaces as well, the live audio, the audio, the social audio side of it is very, very ahead of LinkedIn audio, although I love LinkedIn audio. I love LinkedIn This is live on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook at the moment. And I mean, like your podcast, if anyone does want to check it out, it's on YouTube, Smart Tech Research. And your podcast, tell us a bit more about your podcast and what you discuss, what kind of things you discuss, and what kind of guests you have.
Yeah, so it's a podcast I've been doing for about upwards of about 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. I think I'm closing in on 3 million views, total views, which is great. Who knew, But it's been a great kind of journey to this. I generally do a podcast once or twice a week. I do a regular podcast with three wonderful journalists: John Quain, who writes for the New York Times, Rob Pegoraro, who writes for USA Today, and several other technology-related publications, and Stuart Walpin. They're kind of my three amigos, and we just tackle any technology issue that tends to be in the news, which there always is. And then I'll do podcasts with clients that I formally cover to get some exposure, deep dives in different products or different announcements. And what's great about it, it's a video podcast. I do put the audio stream on Apple podcasts as well. But the advantage of a video podcast is that most of the companies that I work with have visual products. They want to see, they want to show something off. I can show some B-roll or some video during the podcast, which obviously you cannot do with an audio podcast. Although the audio podcast is available if you want to listen to it in your car. But it's terrific. It's a great vehicle for people getting exposure. And then what I generally do is after I cover them with a podcast, I'll do a write-up on Tech News World, which is a wonderful publication. It's very business, technology oriented, and has a demographic that's very consistent with the audience that follows me. So it's great. I encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and they are very informative, and the guys are good fun as well, so it's nice, I do enjoy it. And it's very hard to find a good tech podcast to listen to where you get the information as it happens.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out. And one thing I will say is that I was influenced quite many years ago by a good friend of mine, Walt Mossberg, who wrote for the Wall Street Journal. He's now retired. He's appeared on my podcast a few times. Is that, what his value proposition was when he began writing on tech at the Journal in 1989, that seems like 100 years ago, is he was covering, I think, the car industry at the Journal. And he asked permission, this whole PC revolution thing is happening. I want to cover it. And his approach was revolutionary at the time. How do I write about technology in a very conversational way that is not intimidating? Because if you flash back, and the industry still has a flavor of this, because the companies that play in Silicon Valley, that play in the tech space, many of them are run by engineers, and they're technology wizards, and you got to give them all the kudos in the world. But sometimes there's they have difficulty, and I'll say this at a company level, articulating what they do in a meaningful way where the average person can get it. Mm-hmm. So I try to approach it, that kind of same way, in a kind of conversational manner. That doesn't mean that we're not going to. I don't take on topics that are pretty controversial, but I do in kind of I think in a fair, even-handed way. And my podcast, if you watch them, frequently will disagree on a particular topic, which I think is good. Good, healthy banter. But I think we need more of that, because again, I get press releases, I get information from clients that I work with, and my eyes roll back because it's so technical that it's hard for the average person to have a meaningful takeaway. Now, that's not to say that there isn't an audience for very technical information. If you're a company that creates silicon and computer chips and very elaborate solutions that go into, for example, power conservation systems that go into $80,000 EVs, you have to be technical. I get that. But there's always a value proposition where, hey, what's the benefit going to be for the end user or for the consumer? So I like to keep that discussion really at a conversational level.
Yeah, I love that, because look, I'm not a techie, and you were even giving me advice earlier before we went on this call. So it's about maybe reaching people like me that need to know about, but maybe an end user, like let's say the smart lock, for example, something like that, and and I'm just getting a smart lock for my house, but I actually don't understand how what it is exactly like. And if you don't mind me pointing out, we are a little bit older than some of the tech people that are out there. So do you
I was,
find that there's a difference, or?
and you told me you were 29. Did you lie to me? Because I'm only 27. No, but, no, but well, that's true to a degree. There's no question that as you go up the age curve, that some people, it's not that they're not intelligent enough to understand technology. Let's face it, when you're in the technology industry like I am, I'm eating, breathing, and living this 24/7.
Yeah.
I am not. People think I'm an engineer. I wasn't an engineer. I graduated with a degree in history from Boston College, and my father had plans for me to become a lawyer. And probably given the reputation that lawyers have, maybe that was a good decision that I went into the technology space. But I'm not formally trained as an engineer. Now, I do have a very rich technical background. Again, going back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, I love the idea of, I'm most gratified when I make a recommendation on a solution or a technology to someone, either a friend or someone that as a consequence of my podcast, they'll reach out to me. I love helping someone change their life.
Yes.
Problem is that, going back to your question, most people, they work, they have to take care of their kids, they have a life outside of focusing on technology. So, I find it very important that I don't hold it against people. Oh, you don't know what you haven't upgraded to the latest version of iOS 16 on your iPhone. You're not going to get a Vision Pro. That's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, most people, have lives to live, and I think I'm serving some type of bit of a making some sort of a public service contribution by helping people just understand technology. And by the way, because I do consulting on the side as well, helping a lot of these companies with their messaging, because again, most of these companies are run by people who are engineers. Mm-hmm. In many cases, the companies have CEOs that were the founders of the company, so they have a technology orientation, and they're great at technology, but they may not be so great at articulating what their value proposition is. And I like to think that I can add some value in that area.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant, and that is huge value, because same with myself. Like sometimes they're so in there themselves that they don't realize that the message going out is very confusing. So it's really important. And so, what advice would you give people? You have your podcast, so people can check out your podcast on YouTube. So it's Mark Vina, and it's Smart techresearch.net is your website. But if anyone wanted, let's say there's a company watching today and they would like a bit more exposure, really what you do is you get them to a bigger audience. You have great data, great stats. So you have your what was the million views on your?
It's about 2.9 right now.
Very cool.
Yeah, I generally get 30, 40, 50,000 views on a topic, depending on a podcast, depending on what the topic is. I've done numbers higher than that for a podcast if the topic is really interesting. Like, for example, Vision Pro and anything Apple related tends to be a real hot topic. Yeah. But it's a very, very cost-effective way of getting to an audience. And many of my clients, not all of them, but many of my clients are startups. They don't have $5 million budgets to spend on Super Bowl commercials. Not that I would recommend that, even if they had the money. But the reality is that they're looking for creative ways of cutting through all the clutter, and I think I provide that capability. And if you're interested in reaching out to me, you simply go onto my website. There you can book some time with me right on my website. My email address is mark@markvinatechguy. Just look at the ticker down there. Thank you very much for that. And you can email me and we can set up some time. But it's one of those things that I think that at the end of the day, and this was not like this, maybe 5 years ago, people are consuming podcasts because it's an on-demand type of platform. Now, this is a live event. Love doing live events, but increasingly, with people who are busy, people have lives, they have jobs. Even people in the technology space have jobs, and they can't sit at their desk or in their office watching a live podcast. Being able to watch this content on demand is a pretty critical thing, and it's something that really didn't exist a few years ago. So it's just a great way of getting the word out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark. And I love the fact that this is live now, folks. But if you're watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay, first of all. But please do share it out if you think someone will find it interesting. So just to kind of summarize, I suppose, Threads, your prediction, please.
Oh, I think it's not going to go away. I think it's. Hey, I could be wrong here. I think it will require a sea change. To me, it goes back to the audience, and if they don't, if he doesn't, if he's focused on, I'm talking about Zuckerberg. If he's focused on making Threads a Disneyland-like property, and I use that very specifically because I think that's what his goal is. Even though some people don't like what's happened with Disneyland and Disney over the last few years, but that's a different story. If you're looking for a sanitized platform, maybe there is an audience there. I don't think it's going to be a particularly engaging audience, but I think it's there, for the long term, simply because Instagram has such a great foundation. But until they fix some of those platform issues, which I've talked about, which will help, by the way, that might help make it a bit more engaging. For the work that I do and the work that you do and the work that other people do that are in our space, I still think Twitter is the go-to platform.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm going to agree with that, or X, shall we say?
Yeah, and one thing I do want to end with is that my podcast is a free podcast to watch on YouTube. Please go into that. Look for it's called Smart Tech Check Podcast on YouTube, and you can subscribe to it for free.
Yeah, and then you can get all that information. And I know Mark does. Anything new that comes out, he discusses. So you'll always get the top and latest news as it happens. You're a bit like Twitter.
Or X.
Or X. Oh gosh, yeah, we'll have to get used to that. So thank you so much for tuning in, folks. I see we have a comment actually. Who's that? Hello, thank you for the timely update on Threads. Thank you very much. Yeah. So definitely for me, from my perspective, Threads. One thing I notice is the audience on Instagram and Facebook find it really difficult to adapt to the way Twitter works, which is about engagement mostly. So that could be an issue, I feel. That's just my little thought on that. So thank you so much, Mark. So if anyone does want to contact Mark, we have another comment here. Apologies. I'm Emu. Oh yeah, watching from California. That's where Mark is. Yeah. There you go.
With my luck, I'm in a condo. He's probably in the condo unit next to me.
It's a she. Yes, there she is. Yeah, there she is. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. Definitely, Mark. Talk to you later. If anyone wants to contact Mark, do reach out to him. He's a lovely guy, and he's on Twitter as well. So he's at Mark Vina Tech Guy, and Mark at markvinatechguy.com. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Sam.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.